Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Theo and I love to talk about horror movies. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the very controversial Terrifier 3. Happy holiday season, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Terrifier 3, and I am a really big fan of this franchise. I love the first two movies, and I really loved All Hallows Eve. I love Art the Clown as a character. I think he is one of the most controversial and just really cool independent horror characters that we've gotten in horror for a very long time. I also believe that Terrifier 3 and the Terrifier franchise are some of the best independent horror movies ever made. I'll give you my opinion on this. There will be some spoilers, so just a heads up, if you're not a fan of that, definitely go check out another video on the channel. I will be doing a spoiler-free review also, but I wanted to cover this one in detail first. So where do we begin with this Terrifier 3? There's a lot of controversy in this movie. The first 10-15 minutes of this movie are what everyone is saying online is the most controversial thing they've seen in horror in a very long time, and we'll talk about that. But for me, I just, I want to talk about some of the plot details that get us there and how I don't believe that it is as controversial as everyone is making it out to be compared to some of the other movies I've seen. I've seen a lot of horror movies, like a lot. And I've seen some really grotesque stuff. And I mean that. Like, I've seen a Caribbean film. I've seen, The Hills Have Eyes. I've seen a lot of really, really bad movies that I don't think Terrifier 3, I don't think the controversy around it is as built up as it needs to be. Yes, it is controversial. I will not say it is not. There is a 10 minutes at the beginning of this movie, first 10 minutes of this movie, that really caused people to walk out or puke or faint or whatever have you, that caused a lot of people up in arms. And I understand that, 100% understand that. But for me, I've seen a lot of things. I've been through a lot. It's just, I guess I have a stronger stomach than most, or a different viewpoint. But in all, I don't think it is as bad as what people were making it out to be. Now with that, the first 10 minutes of this movie, basically this little girl, she's probably about 4 or 5 years old. She goes to her mom and dad's bedroom and she says she hears stomping on the roof, and she believes it's Santa Claus because Terrifier 3 takes place during the holiday season. We get Santa Art, or Art Santa, whatever he's being called, and the controversy surrounding it does involve the hacking and slashing of children. But it is not done on screen. You hear some of the bones cracking, you hear some of the gore and the sound effects, but none of it takes place like directly where you see it. And I was really, really hoping they wouldn't cross that line to where, like, you see Art hacking up a kid personally. And it doesn't cross that threshold, but it's definitely there. It's implied. You can tell what's happening. And that's where the controversy is. So as the little girl is talking to her mom, she says she hears footsteps on the roof, and they go downstairs to look at it and see what's going on. They leave milk and cookies for Santa, and then they go back to bed, and the little girl wakes up again because she hears another crash downstairs. As she goes back downstairs, that's the first time we see what we believe is Santa Claus. And he reaches into his bag and pulls out an axe. And with the axe, she then realizes that it's probably not Santa, so she goes and she hides. Well, then Art makes his way upstairs and he begins chopping up the little boy, who's probably about 9-ish years old. And like I said, none of it takes place on screen, thank goodness. But you can definitely tell what's going on. You can hear everything. You see some of the blood splatter and the gore, and you hear all the sound effects, and you hear the bones cracking and the mesh and the mud and everything in between. And then Art goes into the parents' room and does the same thing, and that's where you first see Art the Clown as Santa Claus. He's laughing, he's pointing, he's doing his, his normal Art the Clown stuff as he's hacking and slashing up the parents. And for me, yes, I get where that crosses the line for controversy for some people, but there's been plenty of horror movies in the years that have most definitely crossed the line with killing children, and it's been done in front of you. This doesn't cross that threshold. So after we get done with the controversial scene, We get a crosshair that says, 5 years before, 5 years earlier. And we get taken back to where Terrifier 2 ended in the asylum, where, Chris Jericho is and where Art's head is. And you see Victoria Hayes eating Art the Clown's head. He's being regurgitated, he's regrowing. And this is inevitably where the story kind of picks up the lore a little bit. You get the lore of the first couple movies explained a little bit more, knowing that, Art is a vessel at this point, that he is feeding off of somebody or somebody is feeding off of him. And of course, Chris Jericho inevitably comes to his end, his demise, and he does it in just a really awesome fashion, which I appreciate because I've always loved Chris Jericho, being a fan of like wrestling back in my childhood. I think he was one of my favorite characters in wrestling. He's been one of my favorite musicians. He's just an all-around good dude, and I love seeing that he was in this franchise independently and he got to go out in a good fashion. That's kind of like my rant on that Chris Jericho for that. And as Art is inevitably killing Chris Jericho, the decapitated head, and Victoria Hayes is overpowering Chris Jericho, we kind of get like a flashback of a decapitated Art, and there's a cop who's exploring the Terrifier from the second movie, and you see the decapitated body of Art the Clown, and then you flash sequence and he's gone. And of course this cop meets his demise and he gets taken down, and then you kind of see that decapitated body making its way toward where Victoria Hayes is whenever they are, killing Chris Jericho. And this is one of my more likable scenes in this movie because it's really cool that this franchise has a way of like the first 15 minutes of this movie being just inevitably controversial in every way possible, and then following it up with humor that'll just smack you in the face and just kind of make you laugh and make you feel somewhat, overjoyed that you're watching this movie again. That's the roots and the beans of this franchise so far for me. I think that David Howard Thornton just absolutely, with his humor and the miming, I think he absolutely kills it as Art the Clown in every single fashion he's ever played, as well as like the humor that he brings with that, as well as the psychological and the demeaning, demented, just humor that goes along with Art the Clown. You bunch all that into a package and you get one hell of a character. And why is it, so humorous, and why is it one of my most likable scenes? Well, whenever Art gets, wherever he's traveling to his severed head, the manner in which he gets on this bus, this public bus, and he's wearing the cop's head on his severed body to travel to where he was, decapitated, and where his head currently is with Victoria Hayes. It's a humorous scene because he's on the bus with a couple people and the ladies, and they're kind of looking around. The bus driver's like looking around like, what the fuck is going on? What the hell is happening right now? And the laughs kind of keep coming from that point for a little while. Because after they get done killing Chris Jericho, Victoria Hayes and Art get on a bus, and their clothes are just covered in blood, their guts, their brains, just bloody mess from head to toe. And they get onto this public bus, of which, that Art the Clown's severed body got there with. And this guy gets on the bus and he's dressed up like Art the Clown. He's like, oh man, you guys are incredible, great costumes. I love it. And then he's like, can I get a selfie, or can I take a picture with you guys? And then they both kind of look at each other and they give you that grimace that they both have. And then the cut scene, you can see that they've killed this guy, and Art took his clothes. He's got this whole new ensemble on, clean clothes. He's grinning, and they get off the bus at this broken down house. And as they, get off the bus and go into this house, they go into this slumber to where they're trying to regain their strength, they're trying to rest, they're trying to prep for something. And one of the scene where Art's in the attic, for me, it cuts back to the roots of Black Christmas. You can tell that was definitely the notion they were trying to do here. They were trying to show like it from a different perspective, but it's definitely an homage to Black Christmas. And as this continues, Vicky gets into a bathtub for her resting place. She kind of she cuts her arm and cuts her wrist, and just kind of lays in the blood, I guess, for the course of the 5 years, where it, gets us to present day. We haven't stopped the threshold of like what is going to happen in this movie. There's still some controversial things that happen throughout, but at this point, I think we've hit our almost max. So from that point, I think we've crossed the maximum threshold of what we can get to in this movie before the title card hits and before, you know, your brain goes any more wild to where you're like, I don't even know what to expect from this movie going forward. Because we haven't even hit the title card yet, and most people are either leaving the theater or saying, what the fuck is going on? But if you stuck around, like I did, then you get to go back to present day. We get to catch up with Sienna, Lauren Lavera. She's checking out of a mental institution where she's been the last 5 years trying to recover from the events of Terrifier 2. And as she's being checked out of this mental institution, she's being picked up by her uncle, and that's where she's going to stay. She's going to reside with her aunt, her uncle, and her niece, Gabby. That'll be where the majority of this film takes place within that family reside. And Gabby is just a all-time fan of Sienna. She doesn't really know everything that she's been through, but all in all, she's looked up to her as like a role model for her life and everything that she wants to be. The two really mesh, and you'll experience more of that throughout this movie. So we're catching up with Sienna now in present day, and she's going through it. She's in the thick of it. She's pretty fucked up from the events of Terrifier 2. She's hearing voices. She's seeing all kinds of imagery. She's seeing ghosts of her past. She's seeing Art the Clown in random spots. Flashback memories of her dad. Pretty psychologically fucked up from everything that's happened. At one certain point, they're sitting down to dinner. They're having a nice dinner. Everyone's talking about the holiday season. And then Sienna has this like outburst because she's seen her dead friend from Terrifier 2, and basically that friend's saying, this is all your fault, you got me killed, you know, this is because of you, things of that nature. And it really starts to mess with her psychological point, her mental in this movie, to the point where she has to medicate herself. And she can't tell what is real and what isn't real anymore. She's also really struggling to reconnect with her brother Jonathan from the second movie. She basically is stuck with the trauma and the bad experiences that she's gone through from Terrifier 2, and Jonathan is trying to put himself through college, trying to move forward, trying to get over the events, trying to make sure that he can establish a life for himself, and the two can't seem to get on the same page no matter what they do after she comes out of rehab. Now, I have really, really enjoyed Lauren Lavera as Sienna. I think that she has been a fantastic final girl throughout this last couple movies. She has showed that she is a force to be reckoned with whenever it comes to the horror franchise, and as an actress, she really does well with establishing that you don't know if she's about to break in this movie, or if she's really trying to keep it together, or if she's just losing everything in front of her and there's nothing she can do about it. She is an overall just outstanding force in this movie. I also really enjoyed the fact that they set this up to carry on directly from the previous movie. It's kind of like a here to now, and like you're experiencing the trauma as they are experiencing the trauma, and it really puts you in that mindset and in that seat of what they're going through. And it's nothing new. Like, we've had the final characters, the protagonists, be like traumatized from experiences in horror movies, but this one really hits home. It really makes you settle in the watching of what's happening, watching it unfold, and it makes you think, like, is she going to be okay? Are they going to be okay? Like, are they going to reconnect, her and her brother? What's going to happen next with these characters? And I really enjoy that. And eventually after this, we start to catch back up with Art and Vicky. And they are essentially reawakened out of their 5-year slumber by these two people who I guess are sent into this old, abandoned, decrepit house to, I guess, fucking demolish it. I don't know. They're just kind of there. And, you know, Vicky starts to kill one of them with the piece of glass of which she cut herself with. And then Art, he gets the other one. And I'm going to be honest, this is one of my favorite kills in this movie. It is really, really grotesque, but it is really cool. Something I haven't seen done for maybe at all. Whenever this character goes upstairs, this demolition character that Art's trying to kill goes upstairs. At first, you know, Art reawakens and kind of scares the guy, and then pushes him to the ground face down, starts getting on top of him, and he's hacking and he's slashing with this razor blade. And then at some certain point, you see him take the razor blade and he hits him in the skull with it and goes backwards. As he's going backwards, he starts to just peel like an orange, you know, just degloving this dude's skull, and it shows everything, and it's a really fucking awesome kill. So from this point, you get Art and Vicky. They're going back to Art's workshop, and over the course of this last 3 movies, I think even in All Hallows Eve he did it, if I remember right. But in all, you know, for all the installments of which I've seen Art the Clown, he's always crafted these manipulated weapons of just mass destruction. And you see him messing with a fire extinguisher and this liquid nitrogen and these spikes and all kinds of stuff. And you kind of get a throwback that like he's crafting something that's going to fuck somebody up. And it does. It really does. And it's fucking awesome. Like the weapon is really cool. And essentially it is a freeze drying fire extinguisher is what we come down to at the end of it. And here we get kind of like that third threshold of this movie that a lot of people were talking about, and it comes down to like cruelty to animals. And I think, now for me, I hate rats, and that's what this animal is that gets, you know, killed. But I think they did right in choosing like a rodent that would take place, and I'm not saying it's okay, but I think if you would have had a cat or a dog or something of that nature, you would have had so many people just keyboard warring everything to hell and back. You would have heard screams around the country. This probably would have got a worse rating than it is. You probably would have got more of an X rating than it already has. And essentially, he uses the liquid nitrogen to turn the rat into a popsicle, and he smashes it and throws whatever remains are left over to the other rats so that way they can feast on it as they wish. And now we're kind of at that point in the first act of this movie where a lot of people have crossed the 3 thresholds that a lot of movies normally don't even delve into. That have a lot of people questioning whether this movie is pushing the boundaries of movies. And it's really big. Like, it's a field of minds for a lot of people. Like, if you step on one of those the wrong way, you're probably going to tank your movie. But Damien Leone and the cast and crew, they said, we're going to fucking do this. We're doing it, and we're going to try it. We're going to see what happens. And they sure as fuck did it. Now, at this point, after you find out that artist created this weapon, and yes, it does get used, and you know it's going to get used, he goes to a bar where he encounters Santa Claus for the first time. And he is overjoyed, he's excited, he's so excited to see Santa for the first time. And Santa Claus inevitably sits him down to have drinks with him and his buddy. And they are having just the wildest great time. But the barkeep just, you know, kind of standoffish, like, you have ID, what are you doing here, what's your purpose? And the Santa Claus is kind of like, just let him do his thing. Obviously, he's old enough. And the barkeep's like, I'm not going to lose my liquor license over some asshole like this. And rightfully so. So, like, as this scene progresses, one thing leads to another, and the barkeep essentially gets pissed off because Art the Clown, he pisses on Santa's leg. And we get this scene that kind of plays out as Art using that weapon that he's created for the first time. So inevitably what takes place in this bar is there's 3 people in this bar. We have the barkeep, we have Cliff Howard, and we have Santa. So after Santa's leg gets pissed on, the barkeep essentially says, get out of here, throws him against the wall, throws Art against the wall. Art pulls out a pistol and goes to town on the barkeep, kills Cliff Howard. And then, you know, he ties Santa Claus up and uses this new weapon that he's created for the first time. And he essentially sprays down every body part that Santa has, strips him down, takes his costume, and then smashes every body part to pieces. So now, essentially, we have Art Claus for the first time, Santa Art, however you want to call this character. He has the full costume, he's got the boots, the hat, he's got the suit, and inevitably, at some certain point later on in this movie, Sienna and Gabby go to a mall, and that's kind of where we get our first mesh up of Art the Clown and Sienna again. Now, inside the mall, the Santa Claus that's there goes off duty, kind of does his thing, and Art the Clown comes in, and he substitutes himself in to be Santa Claus, and, starts taking kids in and gives them presents and overjoyous. But as he's walking toward to do that, he passes Sienna and Gabby in a shop, and Sienna kind of has like this gut feeling, like she can tell, like, that was him. I know that's him. I need to do something. I need to tell people. We have to figure this out. How is he back? She starts having all these wild themes and experiences in her head that make her question, like, how the fuck is he alive again? What's going on? So then we get back to Art. He's playing Santa Claus. He's giving kids gifts and starts scaring the kids, and the parents start going irate. And at this point, Sienna's left the mall. She's trying to find her brother, trying to get Gabby out of harm's way, trying to warn people, like, this is what's going on. And Art is there just having a good time. He's playing Santa Claus. He's getting kicked out of the mall as he's giving out gifts. And one of the parents says, hey, you're scaring my fucking kid. I don't need you to be doing this. And you see this timer start ticking, and you know that, like, here we go again. And we're going to see another, child death in this movie in some way, shape, or form. And for me, I thought it was just going to be this kid. Like, it was just going to be like a little grenade or something. Fuck no. This bomb went off, and it killed the whole entire center of the mall. So now we get to this climax here where things start to get interesting. Sienna knows that Art's alive. She knows that he is back. He's killing people again. He's up to his mischievous no good, and she has to try and find a way to stop him. So in order to do that, she tries to go and confront family. She tries to go to Jonathan, who then pretty much disregards her in every way possible. She tells him that she has to go and find the sword, and this is where we kind of get a lot of information that we haven't had from the past two movies in regards as to what Art is and the connection between him and Sienna. And as Sienna and Jonathan, they're having their conversation that gets into detail about past experiences with her father, about a comic book they created in which this angel that her dad created is supposed to be a representation of her. She's supposed to be an angel that can fight any type of evil with this heroic sword that this character uses, which is where this sword that's so important that can stop Art the Clown comes into play. We also find out during this conversation that, Jonathan tells Sienna that basically Art is using a vessel. He's a demon. That he is coming from hell. He's trying to take over some type of vessel, and he needs that vessel in order to stay alive. And we find out that Art is this demon, and that the vessel he's using is obviously Vicky, that it attaches itself to somebody who has some type of traumatic experience in their life that causes them just immense pain. So that's what Art is. He's a demon that's attaching itself to somebody who has immense pain in order to create chaos in the world. Sienna's character is an angel-like character from her dad's comic book who's instilled with this power to be able to stop this demon. And during this conversation with Jonathan, Sienna's trying to have this conversation with her brother, and this podcast host that is one of Jonathan's roommate's girlfriend, her name is Mia, pretty much interrupts the conversation and says, hey, I'm your biggest fan. I don't understand why you did this, that, or the other, being the most outrageous type of podcast host you can be. In any way, shape, or form, especially with all the trauma that Sienna's gone through and her brother Jonathan over the last few years because of Art the Clown. Saying, Mia even says during this conversation that he is, the subsequential serial killer since Jack the Ripper, the most prolific serial killer since Jack the Ripper. She's a giant fan of Art the Clown and wants to get Sienna or Jonathan on her podcast so she can get more views, and that's her main goal in talking to them. Of course, after, a couple minutes of that conversation, Sienna's had enough, and she pretty much tells Mia to go fuck yourself, essentially is what gets told. And then Sienna leaves the diner in which she's trying to have a conversation with Jonathan. And the next scene we get back to the college campus. Jonathan has pretty much exited the college. And Mia and her boyfriend are having a conversation. Mia really wants one of them on her podcast, telling her boyfriend that she will do anything, of which, anything to get them on there if her boyfriend can convince one of them to get on the show. And we see Art the Clown out in the doorway, and Mia's talking about how great Art is and how she loves the character and everything about him. And you see him, he's doing these, he's overjoyed, he's just, he's having a great time listening. And then, we hear what's going to happen next, and they go into the shower scene, which, every one of the Terrifier movies has this scene. There's the upside down lady, there's the salt in the wound lady, and now there's the shower scene. And in the shower scene, Art pretty much hacks and slashes everybody with his chainsaw. There's Mia and her boyfriend, they're in the shower, they're getting down and dirty, and then one thing leads to another. You hear this vroom, vroom from the chainsaw, and then all hell breaks loose after that. And it's a good scene. Like, it kind of makes you feel okay, because there's these self-righteous people that are just trying to get these things from other people who are traumatized, kind of get their comeuppance, I guess. I don't know the best way to say that without sounding a certain way, but you kind of get that from this shower scene. It's very gory, very brutal, very chainsawing, very Texas Chainsaw inspired. I had a lot of fun with that scene. So now we get another flashback scene, and we see that Sienna has gone back to the Terrifier. We don't really see anything of her going back to the Terrifier. I don't know why. I think there's a director's cut coming out of this movie. Damien Leone has said there's going to be a director's cut of this movie. My thought is that maybe it got cut out to save time, because a lot of people were complaining that the second movie was too long. So I think that might be why we don't see her going back to the Terrifier to get the sword. But essentially, she comes back with this box to her aunt and uncle's house, and she has this big box. She puts it by the tree, and Gabby, her niece, is just so inspired by it. What is that? What is that? And finds out where it is, and because she's been known for trying to grab gifts and going through them, and being a little bit of a egg searcher during Easter, if you would call it. So she pretty much essentially knows where this is, doesn't find out what it is until later on in the movie. So then while they're having this conversation, Gabby then admits to Sienna that, like, hey, I read your diary, is that the sword? And Sienna gets mad and tells her, like, you shouldn't have done that. And Gabby says, well, I just wanted to know more about you. I really love you. I want to find out everything that happened. I know there was something wrong, yada, yada, yada. And then Sienna kind of, pushes it off, goes upstairs and lays down, because she's had a very rough day knowing that Art's back. She takes a pill, she lays down, passes out, and then we get the final scenes of this movie. So from here we start seeing like cut scenes that Sienna is having, flashbacks, and like we don't know if this is like a nightmare or if she's actually living this, until a certain point. And that certain point happens soon after the uncle of Sienna gets a call from supposedly Jonathan saying, like, hey, I'd like to come over and talk to Sienna. Can you come pick me up? I'm over at this address. And the uncle says, yes, I'll be right there. He goes to pick him up. And obviously that's Art the Clown or Vicky having a conversation on the phone with him, trying to lure him away from the house. And then Sienna essentially wakes up, and she's tied to a chair. Art slaps her in the back of the head, and then all hell starts to break loose for the final scenes of this movie. But right before that, we get this awesome, like, battle scene between Art and between Sienna again. And essentially, I thought this was a dream. I thought it was a dream sequence, and it's not. Like, all this takes place, and then, this giant fight scene between the two take place, and it's really good. Like, it's a really good, like, ending fight scene. And then we get toward the ending of this movie, so spoilers again. If you don't want to hear the ending, go ahead and shut this off now. But after the battle, Sienna is tied to a chair, her aunt is tied up to the wall, Gabby is also tied to a chair, and they basically are toying around. Art's doing his thing, Vicky's there, and you can clearly tell now that Vicky is the host of whatever demon parasite that Art is. So she's, demanding and talking, doing all the things for Art. Art's having a good time. He's tormenting people and torturing people. He's slapping Sienna in the back of the head every time he walks past her. He's laughing, having a good time. He's throwing his hands up, getting frustrated. It's a really up and down scene that kind of happens for the last like 20-ish minutes of this movie. And here is where we start to see, you see, Uncle Vic, he's kind of tied up on the wall, crucifix form. Vicky's wearing the crown of thorns, and, that's kind of like that fourth, no-no zone in this movie for a lot of people, where you start basically testing the limits of religion and what you can mess with. So, fair warning, like if you're going to watch this movie, it does have some very profound indications of, the body of Christ and, things of that nature, just to prepare yourself for that in the long run. During the final moments of this movie, you start to see like Art and Vicky, they start tormenting individual by individual after killing the uncle. And, Aunt Jess is there, and her death scene essentially is getting a tube shoved down her throat and hammered down with this mallet. And then having rats shoved down this tube so they can go eat her insides, and then hit with the liquid nitrogen. There's a lot of like torment in the last like 20 minutes of this movie. Art and Vicky's end goal here is to torment Sienna into a weakness, make her weak. That way they can destroy her, because she's the only person stopping this demon from coming back to fruition. So that's their goal, is to mess with her enough, traumatize her enough to make her weak. And you start seeing all these like flashing lights in the wind, and Vicky's eyes start turning orange and white, and there's a lot of like demon voices and growling, and the floor busts open, and you can start seeing this portal to hell, and it's just not enough. It's not enough to convince Sienna that she should give up. So she finds that inner strength, starts coming back, and then Vicky realizes that, and then they turn to Gabby, and they're like, we're going to kill her next. And that's kind of like where Sienna starts drawing the line, like, don't do that, don't hurt anybody else. But before the torturing of Gabby comes into place, they believe that they've already told her, Sienna, that Gabby's been killed. She's gone. We've already killed her. Try and mess with her. And they point to the skull in the middle of the room where the rats came from, and they said, hey, we were just kidding. You see that skull? That's actually your brother Jonathan. And they put Jonathan's glasses, or pair of glasses, on the skull, and it kind of starts setting her into this spiral of, I've lost everybody, I have nothing, I don't know what to do. So I guess there's a lot of speculation online about if Jonathan's actually dead. It's kind of like a 50-50 for me. I don't want to think he's dead, but I know that he had a very decreased role in this movie compared to the second movie, and I don't really agree with it, but I guess it kind of plays out the way it plays out. I'm not the director, but I personally wish I could have seen more of a comeuppance from him in this movie, because he was like that shy, like, don't hurt me kid in the first movie. Or the second movie, I mean, and I was really hoping that he would have a very standout role in this one. He's kind of like a background character, and I don't necessarily dislike it, but for me, I don't personally think he's dead. I think he's going to have some type of comeuppance in the next movie, the next installment, but I also keep seeing a lot of like different like shorts about like how he is dead and how they wanted to do this scene off screen so it would have like a different type of value, a different shock value. And I get that to the fullest extent. So now they go and get Gabby. Art and Vicky go get Gabby, and they bring her out, and essentially they say, we're done, we're going to kill her. And, Lauren Lavera here puts in just one hell of a performance. She starts crying, screaming, no, take me, I don't want you to do that. Please don't kill her, kill me instead. And Gabby essentially plays a mind trick on Art and Vicky and says, I got her a Christmas present, she didn't even get to open it, in which she's talking about the sword. And, Art smashes Sienna's hand, and then, you know, it says, go ahead, open it, and watches her struggle to open it, and then there's a sword, and then, you know, all holy hell breaks loose. So Sienna starts hacking and slashing and going to town and fighting, and she does fantastic. As a final girl, she really stands out in a lot of ways. Like, I know she does her own stunts. She's a martial artist. She does a lot of different things that a lot of final girls in horror movies don't do, and she really nails every bit of it. The ending fight scene for me is fucking fantastic. Whenever she first gets that sword and like she cuts her ropes and slashes Art, you know, slashes his throat and he falls to the ground, and she leaps up and she just lunges that sword right into Vicky's chest. That play out for me, I was like, wow, that was really fucking cool. And this ending fight sequence goes on after that, after Vicky gets slashed and they, you know, gets stabbed. You know, Sienna starts getting on top of her, decapitates her, and the white light goes out in her eye. And then, you know, you get round 3, or round 2 rather, of Art versus Vicky, or Art versus Sienna. And it really does well. It does really well. Art gets some power in, Sienna gets some power in. Inevitably, Sienna gets the upper hand, and you start to see the light go out in Art's eyes, and, you know, it starts to fade away. But as it starts to fade away, Vicky's body starts, I guess, the blood and guts curdle together, and it creates this passageway to hell. And the floor opens up, and Gabby falls, and she's hanging onto the side of the railing of this portal to hell. And Sienna, you know, drives her attention away from Art, and goes to try and help her, reaching the sword down, and inevitably that's not enough. Gabby ends up taking the sword with her to hell, falling down this portal, and as Sienna turns back around, Art is gone. And that's where this movie inevitably almost comes to an end. And in the ending moments of this movie, as Sienna's raising her hands up, where she has the cuts from holding the knife or the blade, trying to save Gabby, immediately close, because during the time of which the flashback, with her father in the comic book, it says the Valkyrie cannot be harmed by the sword of which, you know, she possesses. So her hands close back up and it heals. And she essentially says, I will find you. I will dedicate my whole life to finding you, Gabby. And then from there you see Art sitting at a bus stop, and the movie is done. The movie's over. So what do I think about the movie? I think it's a great installment. I don't think it is as controversial for me as it's played out to be. Like I stated at the beginning of this video, I've seen a lot of really bad budget movies and like really raunchy movies in my time. So for me, it teeters with it. Definitely teeters with the controversy. It's not enough for me not to watch it. It might be too much for you guys, for different people to watch it, and that's okay. But for me, I loved it. I thought it was a great installment. I don't think it's better than the second movie. I think we get a lot more lore, but I essentially like the second one the best so far. So that's kind of like my thoughts on that. But all in all, I really think it's a solid film. It will probably be a 4 out of 5 for me. Definitely a 4 out of 5 for me. I think if they continue with it and they go on to the next installment and we get that final, like, giant battle between Sienna and Art, I think this next installment, if done right, might take my favorite spot. But that'll do it for this one for me, guys. I appreciate everything you guys do. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and check underneath your beds. Stay safe out there.